Number left helpless. They had no warning. Earth's Deathworlders appeared. Number. Part 1. The emergency beacon screamed across 17 star systems before anyone bothered to listen. By then, it was already too late for most of the Kethran colonies. Ambassador Zillith pressed her scaled hands against the viewing port of the diplomatic station, watching another transport ship limp into the docking bay. This one carried refugees from Kethros VII. Their shell-like carapaces cracked and dulled from weeks of malnutrition. The sight made her stomach turn in ways that had nothing to do with the artificial gravity. "How many more?" she asked without turning around. Captain Morth, her military liaison, checked his datapad with trembling fingers. "This brings our total to 47,000 refugees across all stations. We're running out of space, Ambassador. And food. And hope." The Kethran Confederacy had ruled this sector of space for over 3,000 years. Their technology was advanced, their military disciplined, their society stable. They had defeated the aggressive Zephyrian Empire in the last Great War, absorbed smaller civilizations with diplomatic finesse, and maintained peace through strength and wisdom. None of that mattered anymore. The Devourers had come from the dark space between galaxies, and they had come hungry. Zillith finally turned from the window, her forearms spreading in a gesture of helplessness that would have been unthinkable for a Kethran diplomat just 6 months ago. "What's the latest report from the front lines?" Morth's mandibles clicked nervously. "The 7th Fleet engaged them near Kethros Prime 3 days ago. We lost contact yesterday." "All of them?" "All of them." Zillith sank into her chair, a piece of furniture designed for a species that had never expected to feel this kind of defeat. The Devourers weren't just another hostile alien race. They were something far worse, a swarm intelligence that consumed entire worlds, breaking them down into base materials to build more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. Every world they took made them stronger. The worst part was how efficiently they operated. They didn't waste time with demands or negotiations. They simply arrived, surrounded a planet, and began the harvest. Defense fleets were swatted aside like insects. Planetary shields lasted maybe hours before being overwhelmed. The lucky worlds managed to evacuate maybe 10% of their population before the end came. "Have we heard anything from our allies?" Zillith asked. Morth's silence was answer enough. But he eventually spoke. "The Valorian Republic is considering their options. The Centauri Alliance has moved their fleets to defensive positions around their core worlds. The Andromedan Union has offered to accept some refugees, but only if they can prove useful skills. In other words, the Kethran Confederacy was on its own." Zillith stood and walked to her communication console. The holographic display showed the current tactical situation, and it painted a picture of systematic annihilation. Red markers indicated worlds already consumed by the Devourers. Yellow showed worlds currently under attack. Green represented safe territory, and there wasn't much green left. "How long before they reach this station?" she asked. "Current projections suggest 2 weeks, maybe 3, if the defense platforms at Kethros VIs hold longer than expected." "They won't." Morth nodded grimly. "No, Ambassador, they won't." The communication console suddenly chirped with an incoming transmission. Zillith frowned. They weren't expecting any official communications, and civilian traffic had been suspended for security reasons. "Unknown vessel requesting permission to dock," came the voice of the station's traffic controller. "They claim to have refugee assistance supplies." Zillith and Morth exchanged glances. "What's their origin?" she asked into the comm. "That's unclear, Ambassador. Their ship configuration doesn't match any known design in our databases. But they're transmitting Galactic Standard and seem peaceful." "Put them through." The view screen flickered to life, and Zillith found herself looking at something she had never seen before. The creature on the other end of the transmission was bipedal, like a Kethran, but its skin was a strange pinkish-brown color. It had only 2 arms, small eyes set close together, and a mouth that curved upward in what she somehow recognized as a friendly expression. "Greetings," the creature said in accented but understandable Galactic Standard. "My name is Captain Sarah Chen, of the Earth vessel Prometheus. We received your distress signals and came to offer assistance." "Earth?" Morth whispered beside her. "I've never heard of that world." Neither had Zillith, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. Captain Chen, I am Ambassador Zillith of the Kethran Confederacy. While we appreciate your offer of assistance, I must ask, where exactly is Earth, and how did you receive our transmissions? They were sent only to Allied systems. Captain Chen's smile, yes. Zillith decided it was definitely a smile, widened slightly. Earth is about 8,000 light-years from here, give or take. We've been monitoring galactic communications for some time now, though we haven't made formal contact with the greater galactic community yet. When we detected distress signals talking about something called devourers, our government decided it was time to introduce ourselves. 8,000 light-years. That would put this Earth somewhere in the galactic backwater regions, probably in one of the spiral arms where no civilized species bothered to explore. What kind of technology did they have that could detect transmissions at that range? Captain Chen, Zillith began carefully. While we're grateful for your concern, I'm afraid our situation is quite serious. We're facing an enemy that has destroyed dozens of worlds and fleets. Unless your assistance includes a substantial military force, I'm not sure how. Oh, we brought a fleet, Captain Chen interrupted cheerfully. Not huge by our standards, but substantial. About 300 ships, with more on the way. We also have medical supplies, food, and temporary housing modules for your refugees. 300 ships. Zillith tried not to let her skepticism show. The Kethran's 7th Fleet had numbered over 800 vessels, including some of the most advanced dreadnoughts in known space. If this Earth force was comparable to typical galactic military technology, 300 ships might delay the devourers for a few hours at most. Still, beggars couldn't be choosers. We would be grateful for any assistance you can provide, Captain Chen. Permission granted to dock at Bay 7. We'll have medical personnel standing by to assist with the supply transfer. Actually, Ambassador, we were wondering if we could speak with you and your military leaders about these devourers. We'd like to know everything you can tell us about their capabilities, tactics, and technology. Morth stepped forward. Captain, with respect, we've been fighting these creatures for months. Our most experienced commanders and best scientists have studied them extensively. I'm not sure what insights we could provide that would be useful to newcomers. Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her tone. Captain Morth, is it? No disrespect intended. But from what we can see, your current strategies aren't working very well. Sometimes a fresh perspective can be valuable. The bluntness of the statement caught both Kethrans off guard. It was true, of course. But diplomatic protocol usually required more delicate phrasing when discussing military failures. Perhaps we could arrange a briefing, Zillith interjected quickly. Though I should warn you, the information is disturbing. We've seen disturbing before, Captain Chen replied. Trust me on that. An hour later, Zillith found herself in the station's main conference room, with Captain Morth and 3 other senior officers, waiting for their mysterious human allies to arrive. When the doors slid open, she got her first good look at the creatures who called themselves humans. Captain Chen entered first, followed by 4 others who were clearly her senior staff. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that reminded Zillith uncomfortably of the Zephyrian shock troops she had seen during the war. But where the Zephyrians had been obviously reptilian, these humans were harder to categorize. They looked almost soft, vulnerable. That impression lasted until she met Captain Chen's eyes. Thank you for agreeing to this briefing, Chen said as she and her team took seats around the conference table. Before we begin, I should mention that my technical officer, Commander Park, will be recording this session for analysis by our Fleet Intelligence Division. I hope that's acceptable. Zillith nodded, though she noticed that it hadn't really been a request. Now then, Chen continued, tell us about the Devourers. For the next 2 hours, Zillith and her officers laid out everything they knew about their enemy. The Devourers appeared to be some kind of hive mind, controlled by massive biomechanical ships that could strip a planet bare in a matter of days. Their smaller vessels were incredibly fast and maneuverable, with weapons that seemed to adapt to whatever defenses they encountered. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to learn from each engagement, becoming more effective with every battle. They don't negotiate, they don't communicate, and they don't take prisoners, Captain Morth explained, calling up tactical displays that showed the systematic destruction of the Kethran worlds. They simply arrive, eliminate all resistance, and consume everything. The humans listened without interruption, occasionally asking technical questions that demonstrated a surprising understanding of advanced military concepts. When the briefing concluded, Captain Chen leaned back in her chair with a thoughtful expression. "Interesting," she said finally. "They sound a lot like the Borg." "The what?" Zilith asked. "Never mind, pop culture reference." Chen turned to one of her officers. "Commander Park?" "Initial assessment?" The human she addressed Park consulted a small device before responding. "Based on the tactical data provided, I'd estimate they're operating with technology roughly equivalent to our mid-to-1st century theoretical models. Dangerous to current galactic civilizations, but manageable with proper strategy." Zilith felt her mandibles click in confusion. "I'm sorry, did you say manageable?" "Captain Chen, these creatures have destroyed entire star systems. Our most advanced warships can't even slow them down." "With respect, Ambassador," Park replied. "Your most advanced warships appear to be designed for fighting other civilized species who follow conventional rules of engagement. The Devourers are essentially a predator species. They've evolved or been designed to exploit the weaknesses of typical galactic military doctrine. And you believe you can do better?" Morth asked, his tone carrying just a hint of challenge. Captain Chen smiled again, and this time Zilith noticed that the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Captain Morth, where we come from, everything is trying to kill everything else. Our entire planet is what you would probably classify as a death world. We've been fighting predators since before we learned to make fire, and some of them were a lot nastier than these Devourers." "That seems unlikely," Morth said carefully. "Commander Torres?" Chen said, looking at another of her officers. Torres, a dark-skinned human with scars visible on her hands, pulled up something on her portable device. "Captain Morth, are you familiar with the concept of persistence hunting?" "No. It's a hunting strategy where the predator doesn't try to outrun or overpower its prey. Instead, it simply follows the prey at a steady pace until the prey collapses from exhaustion. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We're not the fastest or strongest species on our planet, but we're incredibly good at wearing down our enemies over time." She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "The Devourers are using a similar strategy on a galactic scale. They're relying on your civilizations to exhaust themselves fighting conventional battles that favor the Devourers' superior numbers and adaptability. But persistence hunting works both ways." Zilith was beginning to understand why these humans had traveled 8,000 light-years to involve themselves in someone else's war. They weren't just offering help, they were claiming they could solve a problem that had defeated the greatest military minds in known space. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. Captain Chen stood and walked to the tactical display, studying the red markers that indicated consumed worlds. "We're proposing to hunt the hunters, Ambassador. The Devourers have been picking off isolated targets, growing stronger with each victory. But what happens when they encounter prey that fights back the way they do? What happens when they run into something that's better at being a predator than they are?" The conference room fell silent. Outside the viewing ports, another refugee transport was docking, carrying survivors from the latest Devourer attack. Soon, if the projections were correct, there would be nowhere left to run. "There's something else," Chen said quietly. "Our long-range scouts have detected Devourer forces moving toward the galactic core. If they continue at their current pace, they'll reach the major population centers within 6 months. We estimate total galactic casualties in the billions." Morth's carapace had gone pale. That's not possible. They don't have enough ships to assault the core worlds." "They will by then," Commander Park said grimly. "Every world they consume provides materials for more ships, more troops, more weapons. It's exponential growth, Captain. If someone doesn't stop them soon, they'll be unstoppable." Zilith felt something she hadn't experienced since her childhood, the cold certainty of being hunted by something much larger and more dangerous than herself. But looking at the humans around the table, she also felt something else she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. These strange creatures from Earth spoke of the Devourers not as an unstoppable force of nature, but as just another predator to be dealt with. They had traveled impossible distances to reach this battle, bringing ships and weapons and soldiers that they seemed confident could make a difference. Maybe they were deluding themselves. Maybe their confidence was just the ignorance of a species that had never faced a real threat. But maybe, just maybe, they were exactly what the galaxy needed. Captain Chen, Zilith said formally, the Kethran Confederacy would be honored to accept Earth's assistance in this conflict. What do you need from us? Chen's smile was sharp and predatory. Just point us toward the enemy, Ambassador. We'll handle the rest. Outside the station, the first Earth warships were beginning to drop out of hyperspace. They looked nothing like conventional galactic vessels, sleeker, deadlier, with weapon configurations that no Kethran engineer would ever have considered practical. They looked, Zilith realized, exactly like ships designed by predators. The hunt was about to begin. Number left helpless. They had no warning Earth's Deathworlders appeared. Number. Part 2. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Times Prometheus Asterisk, watching the tactical display update as more Earth ships dropped out of hyperspace. 300 vessels had grown to nearly 500 as additional battle groups arrived from other sectors. The sight should have been reassuring. But Chen knew the real test was still coming. Admiral, her communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from Devourer forces at the Kethros V6 system. They're actually trying to communicate. Chen raised an eyebrow. According to every briefing the Kethrans had provided, the Devourers never attempted communication. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and Chen found herself looking at something that defied easy description. The creature, if it could be called that, appeared to be part biological and part mechanical. Its features shifted constantly, as if it couldn't decide what form it wanted to maintain. When it spoke, the voice was a harmony of different tones that somehow resolved into understandable galactic standard. Unknown vessels. You are not recognized. You will withdraw or be consumed. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force, she replied calmly. We're here to discuss your surrender. The shifting patterns on the creature's face stilled for a moment. Surrender is not a recognized concept. You will be catalogued and consumed. Your biological distinctiveness will be added to our own. See, that's where you're wrong. Chen said with a smile that her bridge crew had learned to recognize as dangerous. You're not the first hive mind we've dealt with. The difference is, the ones on Earth learned to be afraid of us. The transmission cut off abruptly. Well, that was polite, commented Commander Park from his station. Orders? Admiral, signal the fleet. Operation Persistence Hunter is a go. Let's show these things what happens when they pick on someone who actually knows how to fight back. 3 hours later, the first engagement between Earth forces and the Devourers began at the edge of the Kethros 6th system. Ambassador Zilith watched from the command center of the refugee station, surrounded by screens showing tactical data transmitted from the human fleet. They're not engaging directly, Captain Morth observed, his mandibles clicking with confusion. The human ships are maintaining distance and firing long-range weapons. Zilith studied the displays. The Devourer fleet, over 200 ships of various sizes, was pursuing the much smaller Earth formation. But every time the enemy closed distance, the human vessels would accelerate away while continuing to fire. It looked almost like they're running away, one of the other Kethran officers said with disgust. No, Zilith said slowly, understanding dawning. They're hunting. On screen, the pattern became clearer. The Earth ships weren't retreating. They were leading the Devourers on a carefully planned chase. Every few minutes, the human formation would split apart, forcing the enemy to divide their attention. Smaller groups of Devourer ships would break off to pursue individual Earth vessels, only to find themselves surrounded by previously hidden human ships that emerged from behind asteroids or space debris. The battles were brief and brutal. Human weapons seemed to ignore the adaptive shields that had made Devourer ships so difficult for other galactic forces to damage. Within minutes of each engagement, the isolated Devourer groups were either destroyed or badly damaged. How are they penetrating the enemy defenses so easily? Morth asked. Zilith activated the communication channel to the Times Prometheus *. Admiral Chen, forgive the interruption, but our tactical officers are curious about your weapon effectiveness. Chen's voice came through clearly despite the ongoing battle. Our weapons are designed specifically to counter adaptive defenses, Ambassador. We learned a long time ago that the best way to deal with shields that change to block your attacks is to use weapons that change faster than the shields can adapt. That's brilliant, Morth whispered. On the tactical display, the Devourer fleet was beginning to show signs of confusion. Their formation was becoming ragged as more ships broke off to chase individual human vessels, only to be systematically destroyed by coordinated ambushes. The hive mind that controlled them was clearly struggling to adapt to an enemy that refused to fight in predictable patterns. Admiral, came Commander Park's voice over the communication channel. The main enemy formation is beginning to withdraw toward the inner system. Let them go, Chen replied. Phase 2 begins now. Zilith frowned. Phase 2? The Devourers are going to retreat to Kethros Fixed, probably planning to use the planetary infrastructure as defensive cover, Chen explained. That's exactly what we want them to do. But Admiral, there are still millions of civilians on Kethros 6. Not anymore, Chen said grimly. We evacuated them 3 hours ago, while you were watching our fleet engagement. The communication channel filled with reports from various Earth ship captains. Apparently, while everyone's attention had been focused on the space battle, other human vessels had been conducting a massive evacuation operation around Kethros 6. Using some kind of advanced transportation technology, they had removed the entire civilian population from the planet in a matter of hours. How is that possible? Morth demanded. Our own evacuation efforts took days per city, and we could only save a fraction of the population. Different approach, Chen replied. We didn't ask permission. We didn't wait for bureaucratic approval. And we didn't worry about property rights. We just got people out. Ambassador Zilith felt a chill run down her spine. The humans had just casually accomplished something that would have taken the Kethran military weeks to organize, and they had done it as a minor side operation while fighting a major space battle. What exactly were these creatures capable of? 2 days later, she got her answer. The Devourer fleet had indeed retreated to Kethros 6, where they were now using the planet's industrial facilities to repair their damaged ships and construct new ones. It was standard Devourer strategy: turn the enemy's own infrastructure against them. The human response was anything but standard. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. Operation Planetary Reset is authorized. Weapons free. Zilith watched in horror and fascination as the Earth fleet surrounded Kethros V6 and began what could only be described as the methodical annihilation of an entire world. But instead of the crude bombardment tactics used by most galactic military forces, the humans employed surgical precision. Massive energy beams carved through the planet's crust with impossible accuracy, targeting the underground bunkers where Devourer production facilities had been established. Other weapons seemed to cause localized seismic events that collapsed entire mountain ranges onto enemy positions. Most disturbing of all, some kind of atmospheric manipulation technology was gradually making the planet's air toxic to Devourer biology while leaving the basic ecosystem intact. They're terraforming an entire world into a weapon, Morth whispered. Within 6 hours, Kethros V6 had been transformed from a major industrial center into a death trap. The Devourer ships that had taken refuge there were either destroyed or forced to flee into space, where Earth forces were waiting to finish them off. But the humans weren't finished. Admiral, Commander Park reported, our deep space reconnaissance has located the main Devourer staging area. It's a mobile factory complex in the Andromeda Nebula, approximately 200 light-years from here. Excellent. Signal all ships to prepare for hyperspace jump. We're taking the fight to them. Zilith activated her communication channel urgently. Admiral Chen, surely you're not planning to attack their main base with just 500 ships? According to our intelligence, there could be thousands of Devourer vessels at that location. Actually, Ambassador, we're not attacking it, Chen replied. We're going to steal it. The next phase of the human campaign defied every principle of conventional warfare that Zilith had ever learned. Instead of massing their forces for a direct assault on the Devourer stronghold, the Earth fleet split into dozens of small groups that approached the target from multiple vectors. The humans had somehow obtained detailed intelligence about the enemy facility, a massive space station built from the remains of consumed worlds, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrolled by over 3,000 Devourer ships. It should have been impregnable. The Earth attack began with something the humans called social engineering. Using captured Devourer communication protocols, human infiltration specialists began sending false orders throughout the enemy fleet. Ships were directed to investigate non-existent threats in distant sectors. Defensive platforms were ordered to shut down for routine maintenance. Production schedules were altered to create critical resource shortages. Within hours, the supposedly coordinated Devourer defense network had descended into chaos as different elements of the hive mind received contradictory instructions. "How are you generating authentic Devourer command codes?" Zilith asked during one of her regular communications with the human fleet. "We're not generating them," Commander Park explained. "We're convincing their own system to generate them for us." Turns out that hive minds, like any network, are vulnerable to certain kinds of social manipulation if you understand the underlying psychology. But they're not individuals, they're a collective consciousness. Exactly. Which means they have all the weaknesses of a collective consciousness: groupthink, overconfidence, and a tendency to assume that information coming from within the network must be accurate. While the Devourer fleet was tearing itself apart trying to respond to contradictory orders, human assault teams were infiltrating the main facility using captured enemy ships. But instead of trying to destroy the station, they were systematically taking control of it. "We're installing our own command and control systems throughout their infrastructure," Admiral Chen explained during a tactical briefing transmitted to the refugee station. "When we're finished, we'll have captured the most advanced manufacturing facility in this galaxy." "What will you do with it?" Ambassador Zilith asked, though she was beginning to suspect she knew the answer. "We're going to use it to build a proper fleet," Chen replied. 300 ships was just our advance force. Earth has a lot more people who want to see these Devourers dealt with permanently." The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just planning to defeat the Devourer invasion, they were going to seize their production capabilities and use them to build a force large enough to hunt down every remaining Devourer in the galaxy. But first, they had to survive the counterattack. When the main Devourer fleet realized what was happening at their primary facility, they began converging from across the galaxy. Scout reports indicated over 10,000 enemy ships heading toward the Andromeda Nebula, the largest military force anyone had ever seen assembled. "Admiral," Zilith transmitted urgently, "our long-range sensors are detecting massive Devourer fleet movements. You need to evacuate immediately." "Our round of armament." "Negative, Ambassador. We're staying. But there are 10,000 ships heading your way. Even with the captured facility, you only have 500 vessels." "Actually," Chen replied with what Zilith was learning to recognize as a distinctly human type of smile, "we have something better than numbers. We have homework." "Homework?" While our teams were capturing this facility, our xenobiologists were studying Devourer physiology and psychology. Turns out these things have some very interesting weaknesses. The battle for the Andromeda Nebula began 3 days later, and it was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The massive Devourer fleet arrived expecting to overwhelm a small human force and retake their captured facility. Instead, they found a trap that had been carefully designed by predators who understood their prey better than the prey understood themselves. The humans had done something to the space around the facility, some kind of technological manipulation that Zilith's scientific advisors couldn't even begin to understand. When the Devourer ships entered the affected area, they began to malfunction. Their hive mind connections started breaking down. Individual ships began acting independently, often attacking each other. "We weaponized their greatest strength," Commander Park explained during a live transmission of the battle. "Their collective consciousness depends on quantum-level communication between individual units. Disrupt that communication, and they revert to their base programming, which is essentially consume everything in sight." The Devourer fleet tore itself apart in a matter of hours. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination for millennia suddenly turned their weapons on each other as their disrupted hive mind interpreted nearby vessels as potential food sources. When the carnage finally ended, the humans had destroyed or captured over 90% of the Devourer forces without firing more than a few shots. Ambassador Zilith sat in stunned silence as the final reports came in. In less than a week, these strange creatures from Earth had accomplished what the combined forces of dozens of galactic civilizations had failed to do in months of warfare. They had not just defeated the Devourers, they had effectively eliminated them as a threat. How? She finally transmitted to Admiral Chen. Experience, Chen replied simply. Ambassador, your people are used to fighting other civilized species who follow rules and conventions. The Devourers were your first real encounter with a true predator species. But on Earth, we've been dealing with predators for our entire evolutionary history. We know how they think, how they hunt, and most importantly, how to turn their own instincts against them. What happens now? Now we clean up the remaining Devourer forces scattered throughout the galaxy, help your people rebuild, and figure out how to prevent this from happening again. Oh, and we need to have some serious conversations about galactic defense policy. Because if the Devourers could find your civilizations, there are probably other threats out there that you haven't encountered yet. Zilith found herself wondering if the cure might be more dangerous than the disease. These humans had demonstrated capabilities that dwarfed anything in known space. They had casually reorganized the strategic balance of an entire galaxy in a matter of days. But looking at the refugee ships still docking at her station ships filled with people who would have died without human intervention, she decided that was a problem for another day. For now, the hunters had become the hunted. And Earth's children had proven that sometimes the best defense against a predator was a better predat, or number left helpless. They had no warning. Earth's Deathworlders appeared. Number, Part 3. 6 months after the Battle of Andromeda Nebula, Ambassador Zilith stood in the rebuilt capital city of New Kethros, watching human construction teams put the finishing touches on buildings that would have taken her people years to complete. The sight still made her uncomfortable, though she was beginning to understand why. The humans built like they fought with overwhelming efficiency and a complete disregard for conventional limitations. Ambassador, came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Chen approaching, though the human was wearing civilian clothes rather than her military uniform. I wanted to speak with you before the Galactic Council session tomorrow. Zilith gestured to a nearby bench, and they sat together overlooking the bustling construction site. In the distance, massive human cargo vessels were delivering supplies and equipment at a rate that defied every logistical model in Kethran military doctrine. You're concerned about the proposal, Chen said. It wasn't a question. Shouldn't I be? Zilith replied. Admiral, in 6 months you've eliminated the Devourer threat, rebuilt 17 worlds, and established permanent military bases in 37 star systems. Now you're asking the Galactic Council to give Earth formal authority over galactic defense coordination. Some of my colleagues are beginning to wonder if we've traded one invader for another. Chen was quiet for a moment, watching a team of human engineers guide a massive prefabricated building into place, using what appeared to be gravity manipulation technology. Tell me, Ambassador, before we arrived, how long did your intelligence services estimate the galaxy had before total Devourer victory? 3 months, Zilith admitted. Maybe 4, if we had managed to coordinate better between the various species. And how many civilian casualties were you projecting? Zilith's mandibles clicked uncomfortably. Approximately 40 billion across all major population centers. 40 billion. Chen repeated the number quietly. Instead, we lost about 2 million, mostly from worlds that had already been attacked before we could intervene. I'd call that a significant improvement. I'm not questioning your effectiveness, Admiral. I'm questioning your intentions. Chen turned to look at her directly, and Zilith was struck again by how alien human expressions could be. The Admiral's face showed something that might have been sadness, or frustration, or perhaps just exhaustion. Ambassador, let me ask you something. In all your historical records, have you ever encountered a species that developed advanced technology on a death world? What do you mean? I mean a planet where everything is actively trying to kill you, where the weather can destroy cities, where the local wildlife includes creatures that can tear apart starships, where the very ground might explode or swallow you without warning. Zelith thought about it. No, I don't believe so. Most species develop civilization precisely because they manage to tame their environment first. Exactly. Earth never let us tame it. We had to become tougher, smarter, and more adaptable just to survive childhood. That's why we're good at fighting things like the devourers we grew up, surrounded by things that wanted to eat us. Chen stood and walked to the edge of the viewing platform. But here's what your intelligence analysts don't understand about humans. We didn't survive our world by becoming better predators. We survived by learning to cooperate. Every human alive today is descended from people who figured out how to work together against threats that were bigger and stronger than any individual could handle. I'm not sure I understand the distinction. The distinction is that predators compete for resources. Humans share them. We don't want to conquer the galaxy, Ambassador. We want to protect it. Because that's what we do, we protect our pack. A soft chime from Zilith's communication device interrupted their conversation. She glanced at the display and frowned. There's an emergency council session being called. Something about new contacts from outside the galaxy. Chen's expression sharpened immediately. What kind of contacts? Before Zilith could answer, her device chimed again with an urgent message from the Kethran Intelligence Service. As she read it, her carapace went pale. Admiral, she said quietly, we're receiving long-range transmissions from something called the Hegemony. They're claiming to be the rightful owners of this galaxy, and they're demanding the immediate surrender of all inhabited worlds. Chen was already activating her own communication device, speaking in rapid human languages that Zilith didn't recognize. Within seconds, she was connected to what appeared to be a command center. General Morrison, this is Chen. What's our status on the new contacts? The human on the other end of the transmission looked grim. Admiral, we've got incoming fleets from 3 different directions. Based on their emission signatures, we're looking at technology levels significantly beyond anything we've encountered so far. Estimated arrival time at outer galactic perimeter is 6 weeks. How many ships? Conservative estimate? 50,000 vessels. Could be a lot more. Zelith felt her world spinning. 6 months ago, a few hundred devourer ships had seemed like an unstoppable threat. Now they were facing something 50 times larger with superior technology. Admiral, she said slowly. Surely even Earth can't handle odds like that. Chen looked at her with an expression that Zilith was learning to associate with dangerous human optimism. Ambassador, you're thinking about this all wrong. We're not facing these odds alone. What do you mean? Instead of answering directly, Chen activated a broader communication channel that connected to what appeared to be command centers across human space. All departments. This is Admiral Chen. Operation Galactic Pack is now active. I repeat, Operation Galactic Pack is now active. The responses came back immediately from dozens of different locations. Engineering Corps acknowledges. Planetary Defense Grid construction accelerating to emergency protocols. Research Division acknowledges. Xenotechnology integration programs moving to Phase 7. Diplomatic Corps acknowledges. Alliance outreach expanding to include all galactic species. Military Command acknowledges. Fleet construction moving to wartime production schedules. Zelith stared at the display in confusion. I don't understand. How can you possibly prepare for something like this in 6 weeks? Chen smiled, the predatory expression that Zilith now knew meant the humans had already thought of something their enemies hadn't considered. Ambassador, we've been preparing for this since the day we first detected the Devourer signals. Did you really think we came to this galaxy just to fight one relatively small invasion force? But you said you detected our distress signals and came to help. That's true. But Earth's xenobiology teams analyzed those signals and realized something important: the Devourers were running from something. You don't develop that kind of desperate, consume-everything mentality unless you're being chased by something even worse. The implications hit Zilith like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just responded to a crisis, they had recognized it as the prelude to a much larger threat, and had been preparing for that threat from the beginning. How did you know? Because it's what we would have done, Chen replied simply. If Earth were being consumed by unstoppable predators, we'd run to the nearest inhabited systems and try to build up resources for a counterattack. The Devourers were doing the same thing, except their version of building up resources involved eating entire civilizations. Chen's communication device chirped with another incoming transmission. Admiral, this is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Times Pacifica ***. We've completed our survey of the captured Devourer facilities. Good news and bad news. Give me the bad news first. The bad news is that we've found evidence of at least 17 different galactic invasions over the past million years. The Devourers were just the latest in a long series of refugee populations that have been driven into this galaxy. And the good news? The good news is that whoever's been doing the driving just made a big mistake. They've been picking off galaxies one at a time, using the refugees to soften up each new target. But this time, they ran into someone who fights back. Zilith found herself thinking about human history lessons she'd been studying. You've done this before, haven't you? Faced impossible odds and somehow found a way to win? Many times, Chen confirmed. There's a human saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. We may not be the biggest or strongest species in the universe, but we're very good at convincing much bigger, stronger things to leave us alone. Over the next 3 weeks, Zilith watched the humans implement what could only be described as the militarization of an entire galaxy. But instead of the crude, dominating approach she had expected, they did something far more sophisticated. They made every species in the galaxy a partner in their own defense. Kethran industrial facilities were retooled to build human-designed weapons using techniques that improved on both species' technologies. Valorian defensive expertise was integrated with human offensive capabilities. Centauri navigation systems were upgraded with human sensor technology. Andromedan medical knowledge was combined with human combat medicine to create field treatment systems that could keep soldiers fighting far longer than anyone had thought possible. You're building an alliance, Zilith realized during one of her visits to the Central Coordination Facility on Earth's newest orbital platform. We're building a family, Chen corrected. Alliances are political arrangements that fall apart when things get difficult. Families protect each other, no matter what the cost. Even if some family members are stronger than others, especially then, the strongest members of any family have a responsibility to protect the weaker ones. The first contact with the hegemony came exactly 6 weeks after their initial transmissions, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of the massive invasion fleet that everyone had been preparing for, a single, enormous vessel appeared at the edge of the galaxy and transmitted what could only be described as a surrender demand. Attention, inhabitants of Galaxy 7749, came a voice speaking in perfect galactic standard. You have been selected for integration into the greater hegemony. Resistance is futile and will result in the total sterilization of your stellar region. You have one standard time period to indicate your compliance. The response came not from any single government, but from the new Galactic Defense Coordination Center that the humans had established. This is Admiral Chen of the Galactic Defense Force, came the reply transmitted on all frequencies. Your surrender demand is noted and rejected. You have one standard time period to withdraw from this galaxy, or we will interpret your presence as an act of war. The hegemony vessel's response was immediate and predictable. You will be destroyed as an example to others who would resist the natural order. Your species will be catalogued and eliminated. That's unfortunate, Chen replied calmly. I was hoping we could resolve this diplomatically. What happened next would be studied by military strategists for generations to come. The hegemony vessel, a massive construct the size of a small moon, began charging what were obviously planet-killing weapons. Long-range sensors detected massive energy buildups that could sterilize entire star systems. The human response was swift and devastating. Instead of attacking the hegemony ship directly, human forces engaged what they called network warfare. Using techniques developed during their campaign against the Devourers, they began systematically disrupting the quantum communication networks that connected the massive vessel to the rest of the hegemony. Within minutes, the great ship found itself completely isolated from its command structure. Its crew, apparently a hive mind similar to the Devourers, began experiencing the same kind of breakdown that had destroyed the Devourer fleet months earlier. But the humans weren't finished. "All ships," Admiral Chen transmitted, "commence Operation Welcome Wagon." Across the galaxy, human vessels began broadcasting on frequencies that somehow penetrated the hegemony ship's shields and reached the crew directly. But instead of weapons or threats, they transmitted something the hegemony had apparently never encountered before: honest information. "Attention, hegemony personnel," came the transmission. "This is Commander Park of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. We've analyzed your ship's construction and identified several critical flaws in your life support systems. We're transmitting repair protocols that will prevent catastrophic failure of your environmental controls." The transmissions continued for hours. Human engineers provided solutions to technical problems the hegemony crew didn't even know they had. Human medical officers offered treatments for diseases that were slowly killing the aliens. Human psychologists explained ways to improve mental health in hive mind species. Most importantly, human historians shared detailed records of what Earth had been like before humans learned to cooperate: the wars, the environmental destruction, the near extinction of their own species. "We're not trying to conquer you," the transmissions explained. "We're trying to show you that there's a better way to live. You don't have to be predators. You can choose to be protectors instead." By the end of the first day, the hegemony vessel had powered down its weapons. By the end of the first week, they were requesting permission to send diplomatic representatives to the Galactic Council. By the end of the first month, they had formally renounced their claims to the galaxy and asked for assistance in ending their own empire's cycle of conquest and destruction. Ambassador Zilith stood once again on the observation deck of New Kethros, but this time she was watching something unprecedented in galactic history: hegemony refugees being welcomed into newly built communities alongside former Devourer drones who had been rehabilitated using human psychological techniques. "How do you do it?" she asked Admiral Chen, who had come to oversee the integration process. "Do what?" "Take your enemies and turn them into family." Chen was quiet for a moment, watching human children play with young Kethrans, Valorians, and even a few small hegemony beings who looked like walking crystal formations. "It's easy," she said finally. "We just remember that everyone is somebody's child. Even the scariest predators in the universe started out small and afraid, and looking for someone to protect them. If you can remember that, it's hard to stay angry at them, even when they're trying to kill you, especially then, because usually, when someone's trying to kill you, it's because they're scared of you, and scared people need help, not more reasons to be frightened." Zilith watched the children play and thought about the reports she'd been reading. The galaxy was safer now than it had been in living memory. The hegemony's former conquest fleets were being retrained as rescue and exploration vessels. Former Devourer production facilities were being converted to build hospitals and schools. Species that had never spoken to each other were forming new alliances and friendships. And at the center of it all were the humans, the strange, soft creatures from the death world that had somehow learned to turn their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. "There's something I need to tell you," Chen said quietly. "Earth's long-range exploration teams have detected signs of intelligent life in several nearby galaxies. Some of them appear to be in trouble." Zilith felt a familiar chill run down her spine. "More invasions? Possibly. Or maybe just people who need help." Chen smiled, the warm expression that Zilith had learned to associate with human compassion. "Either way, the Galactic Defense Force is going to investigate. Would you like to come along? I have a feeling we could use a good diplomat." Looking out at the mixed community of former enemies learning to live together in peace, Zilith realized that she'd never been more proud to be part of something larger than herself. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow," Chen replied. "The universe is a big place, and there are a lot of people out there who could probably use some friends." As the two of them headed back into the city, neither of them noticed the small group of children who had stopped playing to wave at them: human, Kethran, Valorian, and hegemony youngsters who would grow up in a galaxy where cooperation was stronger than conquest, where protection was more valued than predation, and where the scariest thing in the universe was someone willing to adopt you into their family whether you wanted it or not. In the end, the galaxy learned that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who hunt loneliness instead of prey. who stalk fear instead of victims, and who capture hearts instead of territory. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly the kind of predator the universe needs.